it's Jessica Honegger, founder of the socially conscious fashion brand Noonday Collection, and this is the Going Scared podcast, where we cover all things impact, entrepreneurship, and courage. I am currently out on the road right now celebrating my book, Imperfect Courage. Last week, I was in Utah. I was in Grand Rapids. This week, I am in Washington, D.C., and if you're hearing this on the day it comes out, go to my website, jessicahonegger.com, to get you your DC tickets. I'll be in Denver in a couple of weeks. It's been so much fun to be out on the road and meeting so many of my listeners. I even met a listener for dinner last week in Utah. Yep, you got that right. I'm always up for an adventure. And she confessed that she had always noticed I had not said women correctly. And she was celebrating the fact that I say it right now. So I'm sure all of you guys are very excited about that as well. Make sure that you go on over to Amazon and get the book Imperfect Courage, because this week continues a special series of shows where we walk through the book chapter by chapter. This week's chapter is called Discover the Sisterhood Effect, and it is one of my favorite chapters yet, because I get into the vital importance of women being there for each other. But it's more than just wine after the kids go to bed. It's about saying, I'm in, I'm here, I see you, I see your need, and I'm not leaving until you are helped. Discovering the sisterhood effect compels us to make each other better and to be more than just observers of each other's stories, but to be participants in it. And someone who has been so much more than a participant in my life, someone who has said, yeah, Jessica, you need me to come and buy African goods to help celebrate your adoption, is Jamie Ivey. Jamie Ivey was at the very first trunk show I ever held before it was even called Noonday Collection. She's been someone who started showing up for me before I had a business, before I had a book, before I had a podcast. And I really wanted to have her as a guest on the show because she's someone who I see is a woman for women. She's the host of the popular podcast, The Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey, and she lives in Austin, Texas with her husband, 4 kids, and 2 dogs. She's author of the brand new book, If You Only Know, which is a brutally honest account of stepping out of shame and insecurity into a life of transparency. We celebrate so many of the same things. These are things that she and I are living out in our friendship, in our life, and in our public sphere of influence. I'm really excited for you to dive into today's conversation. Jamie, welcome to the Going Scared podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, there's no place I'd rather be than with you, Jess.
Oh my gosh. So this is so fun for me because, we're walking through the Imperfect Courage series right now, which, by the way, I was on your series you did for If You Only Knew. I still get so many women. That was one of my more vulnerable podcasts. It was probably the most vulnerable podcast I had done up to that point.
Okay, I was very proud of you because it was vulnerable. I asked everyone to be a little vulnerable, and that's hard.
Well, it is.
But it's always good.
But, I'm all about that. You're all about that. So we kind of had no choice. But it was about body image. If you guys want to go check that out, it was, what was that series called? The If You Only Knew series?
It's called the If You Only Knew series over my podcast. I think, don't hold me to it, you can find your name, but I think you were number 8.
Okay. Well, and that's what really inspired me to do a series just around Imperfect Courage. And so when it comes to this chapter, Discover the Sisterhood Effect, I thought I have to have Jamie on for this chapter because you have been someone who has just showed up for me. And not just recently as we become good friends, but before I really knew you, I remember saying, hey, I'm having a bunch of women over to my house to buy African products to raise money for our adoption. And you came and you brought friends. You didn't just come, but you brought people and you rallied people. And this is long before Jamie Ivey had a podcast or a blog or any of that stuff. So I've seen this exemplified in your life, but I've actually never really asked you, what's the story behind that? Because I think when I see a woman who is for women, there's usually some sort of journey that's gotten them to that place. So tell me about that.
I'm not really 100% sure where that comes from. I remember, you'll remember this, but when I tried out to be a DJ in Austin, it was just a crazy random story, but I tried out to be a DJ. I won this contest And that was the first time in my life where I had kind of put myself out there in a way that I had never ever experienced in my entire life. I put myself out publicly. I asked people to vote for me. That's just weird. It's strange. It's weird. Hey, vote for me. And through that process, I really felt supported and loved by people I knew. Like my friends showed up to the table and were cheering me on. People I didn't know showed up to kind of cheer me on and encourage me. And had I won or didn't, I ended up winning. But even if I didn't, what I learned in that experience was how amazing it feels to have people cheer you on. And I don't think I had ever, I'm not saying I hadn't been cheered on, because I definitely have amazing friendships in my life. I hadn't put myself in a place that needed that much cheering ever. And it really, really changed the way I saw what it can be like to encourage someone to chase their dreams. And so I think I learned through that. I've also learned through, I mean, listen, here's the truth, Jessica. We live in Austin. There are a lot of amazing creative women in this town. I mean, a lot. And I think you have to decide pretty early if you're going to be a creative woman who's doing things in the world. You've got to decide really early that you're going to be a cheerleader, or else you're going to suffocate. Like, you will suffocate in this town. And I think I've learned that as well from just people that we do life with that are also doing amazing things.
Yes. Well, and we celebrate that in one another. And I just love that I didn't realize that was kind of your turning point, because I feel like that's very similar to what happened to me when I had that first trunk show. And I remember that day feeling like I wanted to cancel. And I really probably almost did cancel. And it's because I was afraid of the feeling of standing in my living room
all
with
alone.
No one showing up for me, all alone. And so we're so afraid of that fear of rejection. And we're not actually afraid of necessarily the fear of the rejection, but we're almost afraid of the feeling we're going to feel, and that we're actually going to be all alone in our rejection. So then we just don't do anything and we stay feeling isolated and lonely.
Yeah.
So I love that DJ experience. So did you have relationships with women before that? Or, I feel like were you kind of ran around with the guys in college, like you're into sports and stuff. Like, has this been your journey of really seeing what can happen when we choose sisterhood?
I have always been kind of a guy's girl, per to say. But I've had smaller sets of friends. So I've had some super close girlfriends for a really long time, if that makes sense. Like my closest girlfriend, we've been friends for 25 years. And then I have friends that we moved to Austin with. So I've known them for 15, 20 years. So I have had some super close girlfriends throughout this time, but that kind of set me apart as like people cheering and cheering you on. Now, I will also say this is the more I've gotten into my career per se with podcasting and speaking and writing, I am just, and I've learned this from you and from other people that we do life with, is I've learned that it's so much better to cheer people on than to worry if they're going to infringe on your success or infringe on your business.
It's just suck when you spend your energy thinking, oh my gosh, her success is diminishing mine. And I struggle with this. And, you and I both speak to this because it's a thing for us. Like, we don't speak to it because we don't struggle. We speak to it because we know that that's our tendency, but we are determined to not let it win.
Totally.
Because we see that there is enough for everyone.
There's enough for everyone.
Like there really is. Like, that's not a meme. It's not just something we're saying to feel good about ourselves. We have seen that when we cheer one another on, there is always enough.
I've seen this with podcasting. I started my podcast 4.5 years ago, and podcasting was the thing then, but it's a thing now. I mean, everyone's starting podcasts, and I have people ask me, oh, I saw your friend Jen started. I saw your friend Jessica. I saw your friend this. Does that bother you? And I'm like, are you kidding? Absolutely not. Because here's why. There's room for everybody. Like, also, here's another thing that I always want to scream at the world. When people start podcasts and more people listen to podcasts, it actually helps everybody that's podcasting, you guys. Like, it helps us all. Yes. Start a podcast. It's awesome.
And then what's fun is because I ran into one of your fans last night. I'm in the middle of my book tour right now. I'm actually talking to you from Grand Rapids. So I was talking with one of your listeners last night who came to my book tour because I think she heard about it on your podcast. And I was telling her, I'm getting to interview Jamie tomorrow. And she was so excited. She's like, oh my gosh, I listened to the Going Scared podcast, but I never get to hear Jamie being interviewed. And so now she's going to get to hear that. And it's that whole thing of, when the tide rises, all ships rise with it. And so when you have other people start podcasts, well, then you get to be on those podcasts, and then people get to hear you in new places. So it really is, when we choose to lift one another up, when we choose to make generous assumptions about each other, when we choose to cheer one another on, we really do all succeed. You just kind of have to actually try it to ensure, like, oh, okay, this is true.
Totally true.
This
And
is
I,
really
I would think that if you and I thought really long and hard about this, we could come up with a time when we have stepped out and we haven't felt cheered on. Like that's what I always want people to know, is that's going to happen as well. And it just takes more courage to do it again and to try again, because it's worth it.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because the DJ contest really impacted me, because it is vulnerable to enter a contest and to ask people to vote for you and to say, you know what, like, I could go be a DJ on this country. I mean, it was a well-known Austin station. This was not some piddly thing. This was like, I'm going to be a DJ. And that courage was contagious for me, because that takes courage in order to say, I don't know how this is going to turn out, right? Courage is simply being able to step forward into a risk without knowing the outcome and doing it anyway and just going scared. So here you are entering this contest, high stakes, getting people to vote for you, but then you win. But here's the deal. You won and then you quit a few months later. Yeah. And then that was very public. So I don't actually even know the whole story. Well, okay. We'll get into this. We have never had this discussion.
I'm ready.
So I can't believe we're publicly.
No.
But it was right around the time of Noonday, and you quit because of the momming thing. And I felt shame because I was like, oh, see, you can't do both.
Right.
And yet I'm doing both. And I felt so.
See, this is good, though.
I can't believe we never had this conversation before.
This is really good, because I always can speak to both sides. Like I can speak.
Okay, so let's talk. So tell our listeners, because a lot of people, so they know now about the DJ thing. So then walk us through.
Yeah, so I end up winning. It's just speaking of courage, I kind of stepped out like, this will be fun. This would be awesome. This would be cool. I actually never went all the way if I actually won, because I never thought I would. I end up winning. The difference is,
okay, so you basically are like, yeah, sure, I'm going to enter this contest, but you hadn't thought through, oh, if I win, I'm going to have to wake up at 4 a.m. and like,
no, I had not thought about that. And that's really dumb, but that's blind courage right there. I guess we'll call it that. So
sometimes ignorance is bliss.
That's right. I won. And so I started this job. I was, we went on air at 6 a.m. I was there every day. And
tell me about your babies at this point.
So I had a 6-year-old biological son, and I had a 4-year-old son from Haiti who had only been home a year. I had another 4-year-old that we adopted domestically, but he'd been with us his whole life. And then my daughter was 2.5 and had been home from Haiti a year, somewhere along there, whatever. That's the gist of it.
Basically, when an adoptive child is home for a year, it's basically like a week.
It's like they were home for 6 hours. Yeah.
Basically.
It's the first 6 hours of your biological son coming home. Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, that's real.
And I had 2 children home from foreign adoption. And so life was crazy. Life was really crazy. And so then I threw this in. And mind you, also, I had not worked outside of the home since before we had kids. I had done some part-time stuff here and there, like working at daycares with my kids, but I had never been outside the home. So I get this job and I love it. It's the best job I've ever had. I was a teacher before we had kids and a coach. The best job. I loved it. I thrived at it. They were telling me, Jamie, you're good at this. You've never done this before. And I'm like, no, but I love it. Like I found my thing, Jessica. That's what happened. And I'm thriving in this new job, thriving. This is probably March-ish. And my kids start not thriving, whatever the opposite word of that is. My family starts falling apart. That summer, my marriage has probably never been harder than that summer. My kids are falling apart. They're with like a new nanny every week. And this is like our reality a lot of times, right? But this was so hard on our family that about 4 months in, I made the decision I needed to quit. And that was because my family was like falling apart before my eyes. And I remember when I made this decision, a couple of things that I remember the most about this is, number one, I won this job publicly and I quit this job publicly. I had never been in the public eye before in my entire life. And it was devastating. I mean, people wrote the meanest emails to the station, the meanest things on like public boards or whatever. And Aaron would come home and I'd be in the bedroom reading them, just bawling. Because I felt like a failure. I felt like I had failed my family and now I had failed at this job. And so it was really, really difficult. But I also really struggled with, God, I don't understand why you would put this desire in me, why I would win this contest, why I would love this job, why I would thrive at this job. And then you actually would, he didn't make me by any means, but I'm the one that made the decision. I was like, I feel as though I need to be back home with my family. I don't understand it. So I'm frustrated at God. I'm frustrated with my family. I'm like mad that Aaron doesn't have to make this choice. I mean, all the things.
But see, that's what I wanted to ask you about in the conversation that we've never had, because you are a part of a little bit more of a conservative church. Like, I feel like you have a little bit of more of a conservative background. And then here I am. And like, my husband recently quit his job a year ago so that I could continue in my thing and the family could thrive. So I think when that happened, it was like, well, what? So Aaron's career had to win. I mean, I'm just being
totally
super raw right now. I'm not saying.
I'm sure that was a common question, but here's where it was for us is we had built our family on me being a stay-at-home mom. And that was a decision that we both made. And I am 100% behind that decision. Like, that's what it was. And then I stepped out in courage and in just blind kind of like, what am I doing for this job? Won it, thrived, loved it. But the decision that we had made early on was really affecting my family. And so I think the reason that me quitting, although I say it was like the hardest decision I've ever made, it was also the best. Aaron never asked me to, ever. Never, never, never. I came to him and was like, I don't think this is working. And looking back, I think it would have put up a lot of walls with me ever trying to have a career again had Aaron come to me and said, hey, I think you need to quit. Wow. And he just didn't. He really let me, because he believed in me as well, and he wanted this to work.
Because it was obvious that this was your thing, like that you were meant to be.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, you're like an incredible interviewer. You have an incredible on-air presence. And it's like, this is what God used to catalyze you.
And I look back and I have zero regrets. Also, that's the team I worked with at that station. By December, they were all gone. So I look back and I think I was in this, it was a kind of a thunderstorm waiting to happen at the station. It would not have been pretty going down with that ship. And then I got to come home and really, really pour into my kids who needed me at that time. And then when the time was right, I got to just do my own thing and I don't have a boss and I don't have to report to the station at 6 a.m. and I get to have a thriving podcast. And so looking back at that situation, I learned a whole lot. And I always am thinking like, I believe in women and I believe in women like chasing their dreams and doing big things. For me at that point in my life, I needed to be home with my family.
I love that. And I love that you were, exactly. And you were able to say your yes came from a really authentic place. It didn't come from a should. It didn't come from Aaron saying you should be at home because we agreed on this. And it didn't come from you saying, I'm a woman, I should actually be at home. It came from this place of, I want our family to thrive. And I need to be there for it to happen. Yeah.
And
I need to be there for it to happen.
And another thing too, like when looking back, it was like, it never really was this option of like my career versus Aaron's, because Aaron had his job that he was doing and I won a contest to be on a DJ. You know what I mean? It just
happened really quickly. It wasn't this plan like, hey, I'm going to step into a career. Nope. Let's find a full-time.
I didn't go to college for this. Like, this is not a career trajectory that I'm on. I won a contest and it didn't work out. But
okay, so walk us through. So sorry.
I was going to say, but God used that so much in my life.
Of course.
Because here I am now.
Here you are now.
Yeah.
So you quit and then you're pouring into the family. And then what was that journey of, okay, I really discovered this was my thing. Mm-hmm. So then how am I going to continue to activate that part of me?
So after I quit, it was really, really difficult. In fact, the next year, I would say that was probably August, September. The next summer, I had a potential position to go back to at the radio station. And Aaron and I talked about it and we really prayed about it a lot and talked about it. And neither one of us still a year later felt comfortable with that yes. And that was hard because I wanted it so badly, but there was just something in me saying, this is not a yes, even though it looks so good. And then, so about a year and a half after I quit, someone interviewed me on their podcast. I don't even remember what we talked. I don't remember why she wanted to interview me, but I got interviewed on a podcast. And I remember thinking when that show was done and we did our little conversation, at the end, I thought to myself, I can do what she just did. Like I could do this. And so I had this idea to start a podcast, and that was probably December. And I didn't actually start till May because I just, a lot of reasons. I don't know how to make a podcast. I don't know the microphone. I don't know how to upload audio, all those things. And so I slowly but surely learned a little bit as I was going and launched in May 4 years ago.
Wow.
And literally, if you go back and listen to the first, I think you're number 5. If you go back and listen to like the first 20 to 30 episodes, it's sometimes torture. It's just, I think like it's so clear.
I disagree. No, you are such a natural.
Well, it's so clear that I didn't have my groove yet. I didn't know my purpose. it was kind of rocky, but it's.
Yeah, but I'm sure like 4 years ago, even the technology has changed so much now.
Totally. I mean, it's fun. And here we are, 4.5 years later.
And now I'm interviewing.
And now you're interviewing me.
On my podcast that I just launched.
See, it's so fun.
You really were a forerunner, which has been really fun to see. Okay, so as you know, today we are talking about the Sisterhood Effect, that chapter in my book, and you were actually a host for my Austin book tour launch, which, by the way, was that not so much fun?
It was so great.
Oh my gosh, I'm still riding high off of that party.
It was fun.
Austin has just been so good to me into this book. And as you know, I read from that chapter, The Sisterhood Effect. And this is a story that I might have first shared at one of your lives or something. Like this happened a long time ago. And I know it really impacted you because you started sharing it. You started sharing it with your community. So just to recap for our listeners, there is this day where I woke up early enough to exercise and actually blow dry my hair. I didn't have to do a top bun that day. I left my house in time to stop by Starbucks before my first meeting. I was like feeling like a boss.
This is like you're winning already in the morning. I mean, nothing can go wrong now.
Winning in every way. I mean, I bet that maybe I even made breakfast for my kids that morning. I don't know, but that's how good this morning was going. So then I walk into Starbucks and I'm waiting in line and I look over and I see her. It's the mom, that mom from our kids' school who's like the glue of the school. She drops off her kids in the morning and she picks them up in the afternoon. She volunteers on the school field trips. And she also finds all the other chaperones to go on the field trips too. For all I knew, she was at Starbucks ordering lattes for the entire third grade teachers. I mean,
right.
That is a story that I'm telling myself.
For sure.
I am immediately comparing her momness, which in my mind is this idealized version of like the perfect mom who, you even used this term earlier, pours into her kids. And then here I am, about to run late to my first meeting, and who knows when the last time I'd actually been up to my kids' school. Yeah. So all of that winningness suddenly was lost as I began to compare. But then I stopped myself because I have done a lot of internal work, which the whole first part of my book is all about that internal work. And I recognize this is a voice of comparison. This is a voice that cuts off celebration. And so I stopped. I said, I don't have to choose this story. And I pulled my sunglasses up over my head and I looked at this woman and I said, Christina, hey, our kids go to the same school. She looks at me curious, like, I think I might have seen you at some point.
Probably not.
But then she says, oh, yeah, Jessica, I just saw you on the cover of a magazine, Austin Woman. You run this business. Like, wow, how do you do it all? And she asked me in this admiring way. And in the past, when I'd heard that question asked to me,
you would think bad.
What I actually heard was, you must be dropping off the balls at home. And I took it as an accusation. But in that moment, I decided, she's not accusing me. She's genuinely celebrating my success. And so I looked at her in that moment and I said, Christina, I am able to do it all because of you. Because you are showing up for our kids, not just your kids, but our kids in our school. And because I know there's moms like you at the school, I can go to work and flourish in my place knowing my kids are flourishing because of moms like you. And thank you. And I sincerely thanked her. And and I ran out the door and started to bawl. So,
did you ever see her again?
and so, oh, girl, I cannot believe I have not
Oh,
told
no,
you
no,
this.
no. Keep going.
This is
really new?
This is cool. This is super
Okay.
new. But before I get into the new part, which is so awesome and cool, what about that story resonated with you?
Yeah.
Why has that been something that you've wanted to keep sharing?
Yeah, I think that you actually shared that with me on a podcast early on. And when I started my podcast, I wouldn't have necessarily called myself a working mom because, granted, I put it up whenever I wanted. It was pretty just kind of whenever. But about 50 episodes in, I decided this is going to be a job. And then around that.
Only 50 episodes? Oh my gosh.
Well, I'm up to like
50 episodes. You're like, okay, I'm going to get professional about this.
Finally, I'm going to get myself together. But I really did. I decided, okay, this is going to be my job, whatever. And I started speaking more and writing, all those things. And then all of a sudden I found myself as a working mom. And I struggled sometimes of feeling as though, and for me, it was this too, Jess, is that I was I'll say different, but I hear me when I say this, different mom to my oldest when he was in elementary than to my last child. Different as in I was a stay-at-home mom. So I was involved more. Do you know that I used to substitute teach in my kids' schools? Did you know that ever?
I did know that.
Yeah.
I mean, you obviously like children.
I do like children. I love teaching. And so it was a fun way for me to be around my kids and stuff. So I have struggled a little bit more with even these kids got more of me than this one at the end. But it has been really, really, really good for me because I have thought about that story often and thought about one of my favorite parts about that story too is the way that other mom who has a different thing in life, how I don't think so. I don't think she was being demeaning towards you. She was really admiring you.
Oh my gosh, no.
And so she could have been like, well, nice seeing you here. We don't ever see you at the PTA meetings, but she seems as though she was pretty comfortable in what she was doing in life as well. And that's one of my favorite things about the story as well. Not even from what happened in your heart, but how everybody can look around at everybody and say, how can we cheer you on in what you're doing? And just because you're not here, volunteering at lunch duty every Thursday doesn't mean you're not doing great things for your kids. I even just this last week had a meeting with Story's teacher. My youngest daughter's in 5th grade. And I told them, I said, I just need to let you know, like, I support you guys. I am so for you, but I have a job and I won't be up here for anything. And they kind of giggled, but I was straight up like, I can't.
I love how you said anything. I won't be up here for anything.
I just am like, I can't. I mean, even yesterday, Story told me that she has something special in the assembly this morning. And I have this. And I didn't feel guilty though, because I thought, man, I'm so proud of you. I hope it goes awesome. Mm-hmm. And then I went to my office and did my job. So I think that it comes from, here's what happens too, is when you and I and that woman, Christina, and every other mom, when we are confident in that we are doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing, then we can, to use your word, we can flourish in that gifting. We can flourish in that stage of life. We can flourish in wherever God's asked us to do. And I feel really confident that God has said to me, like, right now, this is your job. I've gifted you. This is what you're doing. And my kids are just fine. They are great.
They're great. They're so great.
Yes.
Jamie and I took Story out to dinner the other night and I loved it. We had like a super vulnerable conversation. I was struggling with all the things that we're talking about today on the podcast because I was about to launch my book and I was like, I want it to do well and I want it to do better than this person. So this stuff does not come naturally. This is why I talk about it. This is why
we work at it though. It really is.
We do. We're momming it. Okay. So to get back to Christina, this is, first of all, when I wrote about her story in the book, I had to get, any name that is in my book, I had to get approval.
Could you have changed their names and not done that?
I did not change names. I changed one person's name because it was a protection around AIDS and HIV. Okay. But other than that, no changes.
So you had to call up old Christina.
Oh, yes. Yes. So it was an email and it was like, okay, my assistant helped me with it. Well, she emailed me and she goes, Jessica, it is so interesting that was profound for you. I remember walking out of Starbucks thinking, man, I really looked like shit that day. So she was comparing herself to me. And then get this, Jamie, get this. She came to my book launch party and I didn't see her in the crowd as I read the story. So I didn't even know that she was there. And here I am reading her story. Well, afterwards, she embraces me with tears in her eyes. Literally, the moment before I read her story, she was meeting people at the tour, and was another woman there who was getting to know her, totally innocent, asking her the most innocent of questions that we all ask. And this other woman says, "What do you do for a living?"
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, Christina said she felt so much shame. Her kids were about to start school the next day, and she was thinking, what am I going to do tomorrow? And reading that story reminded her, wait a minute, I'm walking in my purpose. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And it dispelled that shame voice for her.
It does
so
go both
powerful.
ways. It really does.
It goes
I remember
both
staying home with
ways.
my kids, and I knew it's exactly where I was supposed to be. And I remember dreaming sometimes about putting a suit on and high heels and getting on an airplane. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to get on another airplane. But I remember feeling like, if I did that, would I be a better woman? And man, I have grown, I have matured so much. I mean, we all do, right? 40 now. I feel different than when I was 25, but now I can look back and see, man, the best thing for us to do as women, the best thing is for us to stand tall in our calling and what we're supposed to be doing, and to do the best where we're supposed to be. Like, that is the best thing we can do with our lives.
Yes. And instead of outshining, we can just shine.
Yeah.
So what has been that journey for you? Because, what's interesting for me is, Noonday grew really, really quickly in our first 3 years. I mean, I started it in 2010. By year 2015, we were on the Inc.'s fastest growing company in the country, the 49th fastest growing privately held company in the nation, the third fastest growing company owned by a woman. So it was clear. I mean, we were changing lives at a pretty rapid rate. And yet it was my internal dialogue that was walking in guilt. So I was doing my thing, and yet my internal dialogue was, you are ruining your children. Mm-hmm. And that was such a journey for me, that internal story. And so, but it sounds like for you, how have you, because you said stand tall, be confident. What would you tell a woman right now who she's like, this is my thing. I know that this is supposed to be my thing that I'm doing, but her internal dialogue is guilt and shame about it.
I think that we need to have people around us who are going to speak truth to us. And I don't necessarily mean people around you that are just going to tell you what you want to hear. I do not want my ears tickled. I do not want you to tell me what you think I should, like what I want to hear. I want girlfriends to surround me who can be this source of truth in my life, who they know me as a person, they know my strengths, they know my callings, they know my weaknesses. And so they can speak either truth into my truth into my calling, truth into my passions. They can also speak and say, those are lies that you're believing. Those are lies that you're hearing. Or they can say, you know what, you need to listen to that a little bit more. Why are you feeling that? I want to surround myself with girlfriends who, just like you're talking about here, the sisterhood effect, that can cheer me on, that can also speak truth, and that can hold me up when I feel like I can't do it anymore. Because when you do step out and do new things, like when you started Noonday Collection or when I started my podcast, that is scary ground, because you have no idea what you're doing. You had no one before you that you looked at and said, this is what you're doing. I had no one that I looked before and said, hey, show me how to do this podcast stuff. And so it is scary, but I'm going to bet that you had people surrounding you that were cheering you on the same way that I did as well.
Yes. And we have to have the sisters. And by the way, each of us has the power to go build that. So if you're like, well, I don't have those people in my life. Well, first of all, go be the kind of person.
You have to be that person to get those people.
You have to be that friend to get that friend. And then you have to be intentional. I mean, you and I have been extremely, extremely intentional in our friendship so that we could show up in each other's lives like this. And there's also this, it's not only that it's scary because we feel like we don't know what we're doing and maybe no one's done it before. We also don't know how it's going to turn out.
No, we don't. And that's scary as well.
Yeah. So we don't know if it's going to be quote unquote successful. And I think if you define success as the outcome and the destination instead of the journey, then you will just get stuck in fear. And I think fear, it's the fear that breeds the comparison and the scarcity. But when you define success as the journey, as that I get to be a poem in the world, that no one else can be this poem. I've got my own unique stanzas, my own unique song. And it's not just about hinging everything on the outcome, but it's about when I get to the outcome, whatever it is, what kind of journey did I walk when I get there?
Yeah, here's what I always want to scream to women as well is living in the culture that we have with social media. It's really easy to see the amazing things that a bunch of women are doing. Granted, you and I as well. I mean, you can see like, oh my gosh, look at them. They're doing these amazing things. Here's what I want everybody to hear and to like know in their soul is this, is that you have got to decide what is your mission in life? What is your purpose? Here's an example. My show, The Happy Hour. We have a mission. We have a statement that every show that we want to encourage women, inspire them, and point them to Jesus. It's a faith-based show. So those three things is what we want to happen on every single show. Here's the deal. If I release a show next week and it gets the most downloads we've ever had, my success is only success if we do those three things. Because if I release another show the next week and it tanks, like, why isn't anyone listening to it? But we've done those three things for those listeners. In my mind, it has to be a success. Otherwise, I'm just like a little floaty in the waves. Just like one day I'm happy, one day I'm mad, one day I'm not. Now, granted, we both work in businesses where numbers matter. So I don't want to talk that numbers don't matter because they do. But at the end of the day, if I can lay my head down on my pillow at night and I feel happy about the work I've done, it's because I've been faithful to what I said I was going to do. And I think that a lot of times women will look around and be like, if I could only be more like her, or if I could be more like her, or if my book would succeed like her, or my podcast, or my art, or whatever, then you're missing the people that God has actually put in front of you. That's what I say to people. They're like, I wish I had more downloads. I wish I had more numbers. I wish I had this. Those things are great. Man, listen, I'm striving for more downloads too. But I never want to forget the people that are listening. Like, they matter. And so if I'm constantly wishing I was more like her because of her platform and her people, but what about the people that are right in front of me? What about people that are reading my books and listening to my show? They matter. And so it's that thin line, and I know you get it as well, between, listen, I'm a go-getter, I'm a striver, I want more downloads, more books sold, all those things. Those are all good things. But I need to focus more on the people than I do on those things, or I'll lose it.
Your value statement.
Yes.
It's your value statement. So I think that's really important for listeners to hear is, what is your why?
Yeah.
And don't just willy-nilly, figure it out, but really you've got to spend some time thinking, what is my why? What are my values? What is my mission statement? And if you don't have a business, you can still do that for your family. You can do that for any of the volunteer work that you're doing, any of the side gigs that you might be starting. You need to define your why and write down your values so that you can always come back to that piece. Like, it's the same thing. A lot of people don't know this, but my book is not owned by me. I don't own my book. Jessica Honegger Noonday Collection does. And it's because my mission is to build a flourishing world where women are empowered, where children are cherished, where people have jobs, and where together we are all connected. And that is done through this social business called Noonday Collection. And this book is simply meant to elevate that. And that's so clear to me. Like, that is absolutely so crystal clear to me that when it came time to signing the contract or any speaking gigs I do, all of the money goes towards Noonday Collection, so that those dollars, that revenue can then drive towards the why. And so it's such a beautiful thing. Jamie, this is so funny, but I actually read, I did an interview yesterday for Medium, which is it's a website for millennials. And they asked me, and this is so funny because I'm like, wow, this is really good. And I really needed to read this yesterday because, I have been getting caught up now with a book. Like, is it selling? Because I want it to accomplish that mission so badly. So I want everyone to read it. I mean, I really, really do. And so in this interview, they asked, what's your definition of success? And I said, when I consider whether or not I'm succeeding, the question I ask myself is, am I walking this journey in a way that's aligned with my values? Values like love, peace, generosity, courage, and compassion. Am I using what I've been given or stressing out about what's not mine to do? I like to think about life as a song where we all have specific notes to hit and parts to play. And the important thing is to focus on hitting your
Mm-hmm.
notes and not trying to play a part that's not yours to
Mm.
play. In other words, success for me is about being faithful to my own gifts, my own impact, and my own influence in the world, and letting go of the results I can't control. Success isn't about arriving at a destination, it's about the journey that got you there. I bet you think that's hilarious that I wrote that because here I have been on this journey going, the results,
It's so hard. But I think the thing is but you always have that to go back to. You and I also have both have
Yes.
points in our business where we're like, oh my gosh, this could be over. Like this could be done. But we always
Right.
have that to go back to, that why, that thing that keeps you going. And so again, it's such a thin line between numbers and books sold and downloads, all those things, because they do matter. But I cannot base my success and her success based on our numbers, because I have a greater calling to the people that are reading, that are listening, that they matter to me. And so as long as I'm hitting that why, it reminds me of this. We were just in Sedona, Arizona, which I cannot wait to tell you about in person, Jessica.
I cannot wait to
It was
hear.
such a great trip. My husband and I went there to celebrate his birthday.
I'm like ready to book the tickets.
It's so great. But here's something that was interesting is we flew into Phoenix, and it's about a 2-hour drive from Phoenix to Sedona. So we're driving, and Phoenix and Arizona is this different kind of beauty than we have here in Texas. It's kind of West Texas feeling, but there's these huge cactuses. The ones that have the big arms. You know what I'm talking about? Like
yes. Like giant.
they're giant and they're beautiful. And we were seeing those as we were driving up. But then closer we got to Sedona, we didn't see any more of them. And so I didn't really think anything of it. And then we were on this tour, and the guy was telling us about some of the wildlife and the animals in Sedona and stuff. And he said, you notice you don't see any of those cactus that you saw down in Phoenix up here. He said, because they can't survive up here, because it gets colder up here and they are full of water. And so they will fall down and die. And I thought, man, I think those cactuses are so beautiful. Like they deserve to be in these mountains that are so beautiful, but they were never meant to be in those mountains, and they cannot survive in the ground in Sedona, but they can survive in Phoenix. And I told Aaron, I said, this is exactly what I want to scream at women sometimes, is that you have a place that you can survive and you can thrive. And it may look different than other women. It may look different, but don't try to go where someone else is going just because you think that's better, because you may not be able to thrive there. Just like that cacti. I've been saying cactus the whole time, but it's cacti, right? I can't even remember.
I guess cacti.
But they can survive in Phoenix, but not in Sedona. And sometimes we cannot thrive in other women's places. And that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, we can't. Well, and then we're also hustling to sort of earn our worth, or we're trying to be perfect so that we can escape feelings of blame and judgment. And then we're just getting to miss the mark and miss the joy. And that's what's interesting when I look at my journey, because I was outwardly flourishing. I mean, my business was flourishing. I'm getting to step into this calling of changing the world, of bridging rich and poor, of empowering other women all over the nation to own their own businesses. But it was that internal dialogue of, oh my gosh, am I supposed to be a stay-at-home mom and homeschooling like my best friend? That was disrupting the joy in the journey. So not only can it keep you from actually not stepping out into your purpose, but it really is more of, it just keeps you miserable inside. And then when you're miserable inside and you're in that place of shame, you shame other people.
Yep.
So you end up judging. It is. So you judge others, you yell at your kids more. Like when you come home from work and you felt shame that you were at work, then somehow your kids are to blame. They aren't, because they're the result of this shame. And so it's this crazy cycle, which is why I love that so much about your message is getting women to disrupt that story of shame, to come out of hiding, to own their truth, to speak their truth into a safe place so that they can have a soft place to land, and that's where the healing takes place.
I just spoke with a friend the other day, and she's a stay-at-home mom to 2 kids, probably both under 3. And she's kind of struggling with, staying at home and her husband working and traveling. And understandably, I remember those shoes. And she was talking to me about it, and I asked her, I said, do you think that this is exactly where God wants you to be right now? She said, I really, really do. She's like, I really value this. I think this is important. We've talked about this. We've decided it. And I said, then you're going to have to find a way to make this joyful. Like, you're going to have to trust that this is exactly, you're going to have to believe what you just told me. And so I think that goes both ways. Like, wherever we feel as though I really, really, in my soul, in my gut, my people have told me this, we all are in agreement that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, then we have to find a way to find joy and to do our purpose well.
And to have fun.
Yes.
See, and when I was a stay-at-home mom, although it's funny, just like you said after 50 episodes, I mean, anyone would have looked at you and said, this is not a side hustle. So I also want to speak to our listeners right now who aren't owning the fact that they are not a stay-at-home mom. Like, they also have a job, like a real job. It's not just a side hustle. I mean, I was a realtor before starting Noonday, and I don't know why I act like I was a stay-at-home mom before Noonday. I had a real estate business, a website, and had clients, but in my mind, I couldn't be. I couldn't also have a job because there was no room in my mind where you could be a good mom and a working mom. So then I just denied this part of my story in order to, and then that's very confusing for your internal.
So you were like a stay-at-home mom that also sold real estate.
Right. I couldn't say that I also have a job because there was no room in my heart for the both, for the and. And I really believe, in embracing that we can love our kids and pour into our kids, and we can love our job and pour into our job. There really is room for both. And it's embracing those and getting really wrestling with those stories that have told you something different. I mean, for me, so much of it was I grew up with a really conservative mom and dad. I loved them to death. And they told me I could do anything I wanted and be anything I wanted. And I was a spitfire of a child. And my dad is a spitfire of a man. But because they value traditional roles, I didn't know what to do when suddenly my life wasn't taking that traditional path.
Which is surprising to me because don't you have a master's in education?
Yeah.
I mean, like, it seems as though you were always on this path.
I know, Jamie, but again, it's bizarre. It's the internal. It's the internal,
And, I have dealt with that. It's funny because you say, like, more conservative, and our churches, leans on the conservative side. I have never felt like weird for working, but I remember growing up when I was a kid and I would hear a woman's greatest role is a wife and a mom. And I don't believe that to be true at all. I think that our calling is not that at all. I think as a believer, as a Christian, my calling is to glorify God, end of story, because there are some people who their bodies won't make children. And there are some people, I think you taught me this, like, if the greatest thing is to be a stay-at-home mom, then that really stinks for everyone around the world that doesn't have a choice. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I got off on tangent. I think that's been in my heart these days to say that's not true.
Yeah. Yeah. Or especially if your faith influences how you live. Okay. We like to end with, how are you going scared right now in your life?
Well, you want to know something really crazy is, I think you'll relate to this though, is I am about to start writing book number 2. And I'm really scared.
Yeah. What's the fear?
The fear is, can I do this again? The fear is, I talked to our mutual friend Jenny about this recently, and she even said, like, the first book is like this, like, heart, like you just say it all, and you just want to, like, get your heart out there, and then you sign up for book number 2, and you're like, okay, well, now what do I do here? And so I have so many ideas in my head, but it's I'm taking a step once again. And I think that is just so true, that even though I've done this before, like I've done this once, I think it might still be scary every single time from here on out. I don't think I'll ever be like, oh, I'm going to write another book. This is easy. So that's what I'm doing, going scared right now.
Well, I also think there's something about the second book, because the first book, you experience success, you reach this certain goal that you had. I mean, your book did really, really well. And then there's this pressure that we put on success. And again, I think that goes, you're going to have to re-listen to this podcast because you can just preach to yourself because you said that so clearly and eloquently earlier, that it is just about being faithful to what you're supposed to do, that's what success is. And when we can define success by that, man, it frees us up. It frees us up to be joyful. It frees us up to let go of the results, because I think it's oftentimes the results and attaching our identity to those results that keeps us back from either moving forward at all, or we move forward, but with so much fear that there's no joy in the journey.
Totally. And we look around and go, man, she's selling this many books. I must not be successful. And that's just not true.
If you guys are on Instagram or on the internet, you've probably seen the meme floating around, her success does not diminish mine. We have to make that more than a meme. We've got to live that out in real life. To live it out in real life, we need to choose celebration over comparison. Because it's really true. When you celebrate her success, it really doesn't take anything away from you. Jamie is someone who exudes that in my life, and I know you will love coming alongside her online community. So go follow her on Instagram, give her podcast a listen, The Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey, and check out her speaking engagements and more about her book on jamieivey.com. Don't forget to head on over to Amazon to put Imperfect Courage in your shopping cart, or you can find me on Audible. A lot of my podcast listeners have been checking out my book on Audible. Next week, we will be talking about the topic committing to collaboration. So committing to this idea that we can celebrate her success as a lifestyle. Our wonderful music for today's show is by my good friend Ellie Holcomb. Going Scared is produced by Eddie Kolfholtz, and I'm Jessica Honegger. Until next time, let's take each other by the hand and keep going scared.